Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing my jungle tier list for patch 13.16, so if you enjoy the content, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. To begin with, there are a decent amount of changes this patch, but overall not a huge amount of jungle shifts. They were fairly power neutral changes, or they just weren't enough to really push the champ into the next tier. So let's cover them. Echo is the first champ. He gained 8% on his slow and his early ranks. He gained a bit of shielding, 30 at all ranks I believe, and a bit of outgoing damage on the Q. Overall, not a huge amount, and it's not really going to push him into the S tier. He's a relatively strong A tier pick. He does lose to a couple of matchups, especially if he doesn't get a lot of early Dark Seal stacks, but in general, he has a strong clear. He has a decent amount of gank potential. He is really strong at counter ganking. That is going to be the main reason you're picking him, to kind of just answer those ganks from a lot of champions. But overall, not enough to push him into the S tier, so moving on. Silas gained 90 mana. It's not going to affect his jungle clear. He doesn't really have mana problems within the jungle. His main problem within the jungle is actually the speed of which he clears at and the health which he loses. Overall, that can lead to being invaded, and the overall speed which he clears at not being particularly fast does mean that he can struggle into very high tempo junglers. So he's gonna stay in the B tier. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend really picking Silas as a jungler unless the enemy team has a huge amount of good ultimates to steal, as a lot of the time he does struggle and you will get invaded, and there are better AP champs to carry, which you can carry with things like Eve, things like Shaco, his AP variant still very strong, Fiddlesticks, Demonics, Udyr, Lilia, Nunu if you're building him AP in the correct scenarios, and Zac can all function quite well. Moving on, Nidalee is the next champ on top pouch. She gained a 40% bonus AD ratio on her E. This doesn't really affect anything within jungle. This is mainly for lane Nidalee. Jungle Nidalee still is a relatively strong pick. It's really good when you're smurfing on the champion, but in general, I'd recommend staying away from Nidalee unless you are very proficient at playing the champion, you have a lot of games, or you're very much just looking to really quickly climb through the ranks because you know the champ's kit. Wukong gained a bunch of mana changes. He lost 20 mana on the Q, he lost a bit of base mana on the W, and he gained a bit of mana regen. These don't affect Jungle Wukong. Jungle Wukong has really been hit because of pro play, so he's still going to stay in the C tier for this patch. It would be good to see Wukong gain a bit of love in solo queue, but the dangers of that is that he becomes present at Worlds, and I imagine Riot want to stay away from that, so he's going to stay in the C tier for the moment. Neferi is still a D tier champion. She's not a good jungler. She doesn't have a quick clear. She doesn't really have that strong gank potential until a lot later on into the game, where you're really not looking to do a huge amount of ganking because you're usually out of the ganking phase by then. So overall, the champ struggles. Her main kind of redeeming factor is the W and the lock-on and then the high DPS, but a lot of champions have far better functionalities with this, stronger clears, and can output a lot more damage early game. So for the most part, I recommend staying away from this champion unless she receives jungle buffs, which I'm kind of hoping she does this patch, as it still seems to be that people want to play her and enjoy playing her jungle. Shaco received a bunch of mana changes this patch, mainly to push him away from support Shaco, making his W mana cost go from 50-70 to 70 flat, and he lost a bit of base mana regen. Overall, they don't really affect Jungle Shaco. Jungle Shaco, however, is in a really good spot at the moment. He has a lot of good things going for him, with lethality itemization being really strong, and his Demonics, Leandries, Lucidity Boots building being really good at the moment as well. So overall, Shaco definitely a champion I would recommend picking up if you're looking for a kind of variety of playstyles and an interesting kind of way of playing the champ. Rek'Sai is the next champion. She actually received a direct nerf towards her Q early on into the game, making it go from being a flat amount of damage and a bonus AD ratio to just a total AD ratio. It's a nerf pre-level 13 and then a buff later on into the game where you're able to make up that lost damage with your base AD. Overall, hasn't really shifted Rek'Sai from where she is. She's still the best jungler in the game at the moment. She has really high DPS output, has really good sustained DPS output. She's relatively tanky, has insane gank potential, doesn't even scale that poorly anymore, and has really good itemization. Overall, this just makes her a really good champion. Definitely recommend picking Rek'Sai up, as I struggle to really be nerfing her that much, and I'm pretty sure they might not nerf her next patch, so it'll be interesting to see. I do hope they do nerf her over next patch, as she has been dominant for a very long time, and it'll be good to see other junglers rise up. I do know that they are nerfing Kha'Zix and Eve from early kind of data, well, early Spider Axe tweets. That's kind of the idea. They're nerfing Kha'Zix, Kindred, and Eve, I believe. Shyvana is going to move down to the B tier. She received nerfs towards her late game W this patch. Overall, just low elo targeted nerfs. This champ really struggles in high elo. I would not recommend picking her in mid elo, as you'll have a hard time converting her into higher skill brackets. So for the most part, hopefully she receives some adjustment to make her less low elo tied, but at the moment it doesn't look that way. So she's going to move down to the B tier. A couple of additions. Rel is going to be added to the B tier. Not a great jungler, definitely more of a pro pick. Her overall CC is very nice, but in the jungle at the moment, I'd definitely recommend moving more towards these carry junglers or very gank heavy junglers, as they have a lot more control over the tempo of the game, and tank junglers tend to be, if you know that you're limited in your mechanics or how you can operate a lot of champions, then that is where they usually thrive. Things like Rammus and a Mumu. Volibear has a relatively good time at the moment as a tank and as an offensive option as well. He has the Titanic build with like Frostfire, which can output a lot of DPS. You can also just go Frostfire into primarily tank with items like Spirits, Tabacam tank if you really need it. Deadman's is a really good second option. Thornmail, Gargles, Sterix even. Lots of good options there on Volibear. Pantheon is also going to be added to the B tier. Once again, more of a pick like the Talon, the Zeds, and the Kianas, where it's not going to be something you primarily play in jungle. It's more of a mid pick converted into jungle. However, people do enjoy playing Pantheon. He has really good crowd control for ganking lanes with his W. Not a bad clear speed either, with his Q doing 105% damage to monsters. So there is strengths there. And the other one, which is played enough to kind of merit being added to the tier list, is Olaf. Not a great jungler, definitely has a lot of weaknesses in his clear speed not being particularly high. He is much better just as a laner for this kind of reason, but overall still functions as a jungler, can be picked, just know there is better AD options in the game at the moment. Overall, that's kind of the idea of the tier list at the moment. Not a huge amount shifted. For the most part, most of these champs are either power neutral or just added in. Things like Olaf, Rel, Pantheon, new additions to the tier list. Neutral changes, things like Echo, Silas, wherever he is here. Nili and Wukong, also power neutral changes, not really adjusting their tier list spot. Neferi, not moving because she's just not a great jungler in her current state. Shaco, very limited adjustments. Rek'Sai, not enough of an adjustment. And Shyvana, being the only real champ which is adjusted into the B tier, not in a healthy spot for solo queue, definitely, with her being too dominant low elo and not good enough in high. A couple of champs I do want to talk about though at the moment, things like, which I definitely recommend playing, Jarvan in a really good state at the moment, with Shojin being changed next patch, I believe, along with Stridebreaker. There is a really good chance that this champ does become the best jungler in the game, with nerfs to Kha'Zix's Q, Eva, and Kindred's Q, I believe. Those were a couple of the changes which I saw. Kane also, I think his W is going down from 130% total AD ratio to 100%, which is also a pretty big nerf. Other champs which I would also recommend picking up, Graves always kind of stays within the meta. He never usually falls out of it, and there is a high chance he does get buffed next patch, with Worlds coming up and not seeing any pro play at the moment. Udyr, also another good one, has an AP and an AD variant. And a couple of tanks, Nunu and Zac, you might be surprised to see them in the S tier. How I just deleted Nunu, whoops. But yeah, both these champs have a relatively good time in solo queue at the moment with their kind of unique gank setups. Both of them have strong AP variant builds if you do need it. But overall, the tank builds are just performing really well at the moment. Sunfires and Radiant make a great two-item pairing, along with items like Abyssal, Demonics. Darkseer is always a really good pickup on these champions, as they have good AP ratios. And then things like Thornmail can be good to round out builds. Another champ which is still also doing relatively well at the moment, which is another tank, is Maokai. It has been nerfed a couple of times, but even then, he's very simple to play, has great gank setup. Low elo wise for tanks, probably looking at something more like a Mordekaiser Ramos, a Mumu, or Volibear. Into dash comps, Poppy is kind of viable, definitely within that regard. Has a slower clear and can be harder to operate, but still definitely there as a strong pick. And then Trundle, avoid him. I don't like Trundle in his current state. I think he's either too squishy if you build him as a damage champion, or doesn't do a huge amount if you build him as a tanky champion. So, I mean, I'm kind of considering moving him down a tier, as I think his merit really comes from picking him into tanky AD comps, but a lot of the champs within the meta are AP. But there are some decent AD options. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.